In the world of professional wrestling, legacy is everything. You've got the Anoa'i dynasty, the Rhodes family, the Harts, names that are practically carved into the turnbuckles. But every so often, a new bloodline shows up from a place nobody saw coming. For decades, the name Seagal meant one thing: bone-crunching, Aikido-style Hollywood action. It was a brand built on blockbuster movies that defined an entire era of tough guy cinema. The next chapter of that legacy, though, isn't being written on a movie set. It's being forged in blood, sweat, and chaos inside the unforgiving squared circle. This is the story of a woman born into a world of incredible fame, who chose to turn her back on it to create a third, far more brutal world of her own. This is the story of Arissa LeBrock. Born to an action movie legend and a world-famous supermodel, Arissa LeBrock was seemingly destined for a life on the red carpet. But she walked away from that world, choosing instead the blood and sweat of the wrestling ring. This isn't just another story of a celebrity's daughter playing wrestler. This is the story of how a major setback nearly ended her dream before it even began, and the brutal, untold journey she took to fight her way back and carve out her own path of havoc. To really get why Arissa LeBrock's choice is such a big deal, you have to understand the world she was born into on July 24, 1993. It's a world most of us can only imagine. Her father is Steven Seagal, the martial arts master whose name was synonymous with action in the late 80s and 90s. He wasn't just an actor. He was a legitimate 7th Dan black belt in Aikido, a man whose on-screen persona was built on real deadly skill. Her mother is Kelly LeBrock, the supermodel and actress who practically defined the word bombshell for a generation. She was the dream girl in Weird Science and the iconic Woman in Red. Together, they were a collision of two worlds: the rugged brutality of martial arts and the untouchable glamour of high fashion. Arissa grew up in the shadow of these two massive legacies. The easy path was laid out for her: follow her mother onto the runway or her father onto the big screen. And for a while, it looked like she'd take it. She stepped into modeling, appearing in ad campaigns and walking runways, a natural heir to her mother's stunning looks. She was doing what a Hollywood kid was supposed to do. But underneath it all, a different inheritance was taking root. While she had her mother's star quality, she also had her father's discipline and a deep, powerful connection to combat. She started training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a grueling martial art that has no room for ego. At the Paragon Jiu-Jitsu and Kickboxing Academy in California, she wasn't Steven Seagal's daughter. She was just another student learning leverage and submission. This wasn't a hobby. It was a passion. It was the first sign that the quiet, brutal world of her father held more appeal than the dazzling one of her mother. That fighting spirit was there, but it wasn't destined for the movies. It was heading toward the far more unforgiving world of professional wrestling. For any aspiring athlete with a combat sports background and a famous name, one place represents the absolute pinnacle where sports and spectacle collide: World Wrestling Entertainment. In December 2019, the news broke that Arissa LeBrock was headed to the WWE Performance Center in Orlando for a tryout. On paper, she was a perfect recruit. She had the look, the charisma, a legit martial arts background, and a name that makes headlines. She wasn't just another hopeful. She was a potential crossover star, a story ready to be told. The wrestling world buzzed with what seemed like an obvious next step: an NXT contract, a dominant run, and an eventual main roster debut felt almost inevitable. For Arissa, this was more than a job. It was a chance to prove she was more than the sum of her famous parents, to step out of their shadows and into a spotlight she earned herself. The Seagal name might open the door, but she knew that once you step through the ropes, a name means nothing. The ring is the ultimate truth-teller. It exposes frauds and crowns warriors. She arrived in Orlando ready to prove which one she was. The path seemed set. The dream was right there. But the world of pro wrestling is brutally unforgiving. It doesn't care about your last name or your potential. It demands a physical price, and sometimes it collects in the cruelest way imaginable. The WWE tryout didn't end with a contract. It ended in disappointment. Shortly after the grueling multi-day camp, Arissa suffered an injury that forced her to slam the brakes on her wrestling career. The specifics have been kept private, but the setback was serious enough to put her dream on hold indefinitely. The momentum she had built, the future that seemed so close, was suddenly ripped away. For most people, especially someone with the safety net of fame and fortune, this would have been the end. It would have been a sign to go back to the comfortable world she came from. The physical recovery was one thing, but the psychological toll was something else entirely. Following the injury, Arissa vanished from the wrestling radar. The buzz died down, and her story became a what if. She fell into a dark period of self-doubt. In a moment of incredible honesty, she later admitted, "I realized that I had become comfortable in the darkest, worst place in my life." Think about that. She had found a twisted comfort in the place where the fight was over and the dream was dead. The pain of failure had become her new normal. This is where character is truly forged. Do you stay in the darkness, or do you fight your way back, even if it means starting from scratch? Arissa LeBrock was at a crossroads. Then her phone rang, and on the other end was a man who knows a thing or two about legacy, darkness, and reinvention. The call came from Dustin Rhodes. Known to millions as the brilliant and bizarre Goldust, Dustin is the Natural, a second-generation legend who has seen it all. As the son of the iconic Dusty Rhodes, he spent a career fighting to build his own identity. He understood Arissa's struggle on a level few could. He offered her a second chance, an invitation to train at his Rhodes Wrestling Academy in Austin, Texas. For Arissa, that call was a lifeline. She later said, "When I got the call from Dustin, I realized that I had become comfortable in the darkest, worst place in my life. It was time for me to give every ounce of passion within me to professional wrestling." She packed her bags and headed to Texas, not as a celebrity, but as a rookie starting over. The Rhodes Wrestling Academy is no place for the entitled. It's an old-school gym where you earn respect with sweat. She learned how to take a bump, the art of falling to protect your body while making it look painful. She drilled fundamentals, ran the ropes until her lungs burned, and studied the psychology of telling a story without a single word. She wasn't just healing, she was being rebuilt. She worked with a personal trainer to methodically get, as Dustin put it, all her ducks in a row. She was building a foundation of resilience. Dustin Rhodes saw her dedication and was blown away. You could hear the pride in his voice during an interview. "She's doing a great job, but this is only the beginning for her," he said, before making a bold prediction. "Pretty soon the whole world's going to be talking about Arissa LeBrock." Coming from a legend like Dustin, that's a massive vote of confidence, one earned not by her name, but by her grit. This story is about more than wrestling. It's about refusing to let a setback define you. It's about fighting back when it feels like the world has counted you out. If you're inspired by Arissa's journey, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss what comes next, because the world was about to see the force that was forged in the fires of the Rhodes Academy. After months of grueling, anonymous work, the moment arrived. In March 2023, Arissa LeBrock made her in-ring debut at a student showcase for the Rhodes Wrestling Academy. It wasn't in a huge arena, but in front of a small, passionate Texas crowd that knows the sacrifice it takes to step in that ring. When she walked through the curtain, the transformation was undeniable. She wasn't a model playing wrestler. She carried herself with a cold, focused intensity that was chillingly familiar to anyone who's seen her father's movies. The second the bell rang, it was clear this was real. Reports from her debut described her performance as powerful and efficient, showing off a style that got people buzzing. Her approach was a dangerous mix of her BJJ grappling and hard-hitting pro wrestling power. When the fight hit the mat, her skills were obvious. She won her debut match, and as her arm was raised in that small Texas hall, something fundamental shifted. She wasn't just Steven Seagal's daughter anymore. She was a professional wrestler who had clawed her way back from the brink to earn that title. That debut was a statement. It was the end of the chapter titled What If, and the fiery start of the chapter titled What Is. Stylistically, she brings something unique to the table. Her legitimate BJJ background gives her a dangerous submission arsenal that can end a match at any moment, creating a sense of unpredictable danger reminiscent of former MMA stars in wrestling. She also has a physical dominance that allows her to overpower opponents with raw strength. This blend of legitimate skill, power, and inherited showmanship makes her one of the most intriguing prospects in women's wrestling today. With a successful debut in the books and the wrestling world taking notice, the big question is, what's next? The wrestling landscape is a war zone between two giants, WWE and AEW, and Arissa LeBrock is now one of the most interesting unsigned talents out there. A return to WWE would be an incredible redemption story, a chance to finish the journey that was cut short in 2019. Imagine her walking back into the Performance Center, not as a hopeful, but as a fully formed competitor who refused to take no for an answer. A debut in NXT or on the main roster would inject a dose of martial arts violence into a division filled with world-class athletes. On the other hand, All Elite Wrestling presents an equally exciting option. Her mentor, Dustin Rhodes, is a foundational figure there. AEW's often more sport-centric presentation could be the perfect canvas for Arissa's combat style. A shocking AEW debut, maybe standing face-to-face with a top champion, would instantly establish her as a predator at the top of the food chain. Regardless of where she lands, one thing is certain. Arissa LeBrock is no longer a question mark. She has the look, the pedigree, the legitimacy, and most importantly, a comeback story that fans can connect with. She is building her moment, one step at a time, proving she's a force to be reckoned with not because of who her parents are, but because of the warrior she chose to become. The journey from Hollywood red carpets to the gritty canvas of a wrestling ring is a path few would ever choose. Arissa LeBrock didn't just choose it, she embraced it, even when it broke her. She took the weight of a famous legacy, the devastation of a major injury, and the darkness of failure, and she forged it all into a weapon. She has proven she isn't in wrestling to be famous. She was already born famous. She's in wrestling because she chose the hard road, the painful road that leads to a legacy that is truly her own. She didn't just step out of her parents' shadows. She's creating her own, one that now looms over the landscape of women's wrestling. The question is no longer if she belongs. The only question left is, who will be brave enough to stand in her way? What do you think is next for Arissa LeBrock? Should she finish her story in WWE or unleash havoc alongside her mentor in AEW? Let us know your dream matches in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure you like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the biggest stories in wrestling. Thanks for watching.